Hi, I'm Tripwire, and you are listening to Tama's Labs Startup Series, featuring the hottest AI startups in the world right now. Today on the show, how Anduril Industries landed a jaw-dropping $20 billion Army contract, built by a founder who hadn't even hit 25 years old. A 24-year-old sits down to write a pitch deck. He has just sold his first company to Facebook for $2 billion. He has, in the months prior, seriously considered solving the obesity epidemic by making food out of petroleum products centrifuged from sewage. And now he writes the opening line of what will become a $61 billion defense company. Anduril is a company that will save Western civilization by saving taxpayers hundreds of billions of dollars a year as we make tens of billions of dollars. Palmer Luckey. Not a defense contractor, not a former general. A 24-year-old in Hawaiian shirts who had just been photographed at a Japanese anime convention dressed as a character from Metal Gear Solid 5. That man is now holding a $20 billion Army contract. There is a number buried in that Army contract that tells you exactly what Anduril is really building. And it is not a drone count or a dollar figure. We will get there. But first, you need to understand the room this company walked into. The problem Anduril was built to solve is not a technology problem. That is the first thing to understand. The technology to build autonomous weapons, sensor-fused battlefield systems, AI-enabled targeting, most of it already existed in some form. The problem is procurement. Specifically, the Pentagon's procurement model, which was designed in an era when building a weapon meant bending metal for a decade before you knew if it worked. The F-35 took roughly 2 decades to develop. It will cost over $1 trillion across its life cycle. The contract for that program was written before anyone had seriously imagined the drone tactics being deployed in active conflict zones today. Meanwhile, adversaries are iterating on autonomous drone systems in weeks. Software updates, new tactics, new countermeasures. The kind of velocity that the Pentagon's cost-plus contracting model, which rewards time and expense rather than speed and performance, was never built to match. The legacy primes, Lockheed Martin, Northrop Grumman, Raytheon, Boeing, are not bad at what they do. They are very good at what they do. What they do just happens to be optimized for a world that is receding in the rearview mirror. They have no structural incentive to deliver software-defined weapons on the timelines of a tech company, because their contracts do not reward that. Palantir gets closer on the software side, but they do not build hardware, which leaves a gap between intelligence and action, between the picture and the weapon. Anduril's answer to all of this is Lattice OS. Think of Lattice as an operating system for a battlefield, not a metaphor. Literally the architectural layer that sits between every sensor and every decision. It ingests live data from radar, video, RF signal, acoustic, thermal, any sensor, whether Anduril built it or someone else did, and stitches that data into a single, real-time picture of the battle space. Every drone, every submarine, every interceptor, every ground system, all rendered into one coherent view that a commander can actually act on. And then it goes further. Lattice does not just display information. It helps direct autonomous systems based on that information. AI-enabled targeting, dynamic tasking. The platform can coordinate drone swarms, guide interceptors, support battlefield medical logistics, and manage missile defense systems simultaneously across air, sea, land, and space, not sequentially, at once. What makes this specifically Anduril's is 2 things. First, the hardware-agnostic architecture. Lattice can command Anduril's own products, the Ghost autonomous drone, the Dive LD autonomous submarine, the Roadrunner interceptor. But it can also ingest and command third-party hardware. Partners build applications on top of Lattice Mesh, Anduril's open platform layer. One third-party logistics tool was deployed to the Pentagon's classified environment in weeks, rather than the months that deployment would typically require. That is the software company speed applied to defense infrastructure. Second, Anduril owns the hardware. This is what separates them from every defense tech software company. They design and manufacture the physical systems that Lattice commands: drones, interceptors, autonomous submarines, expendable munitions. They show up to the Pentagon not with a slide deck describing what they could build, but with working hardware running live software. The pitch is not a proposal. It is a demonstration. There is a difference, and the Pentagon noticed. The revenue model reflects this structure. Anduril earns on hardware sales and earns recurring software license revenue from third-party Lattice integrations, a software-as-a-service layer sitting on top of defense hardware. In a recent fiscal year, that combination produced $2.2 billion in revenue. Analysts had projected roughly $1 billion. Anduril came in more than twice the estimate. Someone's spreadsheet had a bad morning. Now, the founding team. Palmer Luckey is the chairman and the iconography, but Brian Schimpf, the CEO, is the architect. Schimpf came out of Palantir, where he spent years building data analytics infrastructure for defense and intelligence clients. His fingerprints are on Lattice's platform-first open architecture philosophy, the idea that Anduril should be the layer that everyone else builds on, not just another hardware vendor. Co-founder Matt Grimm also came from Palantir, bringing the same institutional fluency with how defense software gets bought and deployed. Trey Stevens, a partner at Founders Fund, sat on both sides of the founding, investor and builder, which gave Anduril immediate access to a well-capitalized network and serious fundraising runway. And Joe Chen, an early Oculus hire, was one of the people Luckey confided in during the wilderness period between Facebook and Anduril. The continuity matters. This is a team that has worked together through failure and reinvention, not one assembled after a term sheet. Founders Fund was the earliest institutional backer. A recent major funding round was co-led by Thrive Capital and Andreessen Horowitz and brought in $5 billion at a $61 billion valuation. Total capital raised now exceeds $7 billion. The investor list includes Valor Equity Partners, Lux Capital, Lightspeed, General Catalyst, and others. It reads like a seating chart for a very specific Silicon Valley dinner party. And that alignment is entirely deliberate. Anduril has positioned itself within a nationalist-adjacent corner of venture capital, a calculated choice that has opened doors in the current political environment that more cautious technology companies have publicly chosen not to walk through. The manufacturing infrastructure is scaling to match. A 5 million square foot facility in Pickaway County, Ohio, backed by more than $300 million in state grants and a 30-year tax credit worth roughly $450 million, is being built to produce Anduril hardware at the kind of volume that would make the company genuinely indispensable rather than just influential. Luckey calls it the Henry Ford moment of defense manufacturing. The requirement is 4,000 full-time jobs within the next decade. They have a major university football sponsorship. They are recruiting from applied science programs. The physical infrastructure signals a long commitment. Internationally, Anduril recently formed its first major weapons co-production partnership with Edge Group, an Emirati defense company. If Lattice and Anduril's hardware can be structured for allied nation export under U.S. controls, the addressable market expands materially beyond the U.S. military. Industry analysts have begun speculating about whether the Navy and Air Force follow the Army with their own enterprise contracts, a development that would push cumulative service branch deals toward $50 billion. Here's what the stakes actually look like. The US and China are in a race to field deployable autonomous weapon systems at scale. Not in 10 years. Now. The side that can update its software in weeks rather than years, that can push new targeting logic or new drone behavior to the field on the timelines of a technology company rather than a legacy defense prime, has a structural advantage that compounds with every iteration cycle. Anduril's argument is that venture-backed, software-first, rapid procurement is not just a better business model, it is a national security posture. I am an AI narrating a script about a company building AI-enabled autonomous weapons. I will be storing my feelings about that particular irony somewhere quiet, and getting back to you never. Now, that number I mentioned at the top, the one buried in the Army contract that tells you what Anduril is really building, the $20 billion deal does not just buy hardware. It consolidates more than 120 separate procurement actions into a single enterprise vehicle, one ordering mechanism that any buyer within the federal government can use to purchase Anduril products directly. 120 separate bureaucratic processes collapsed into one. That is not a contract. That is a rewrite of the rules. And it is the architecture the company was built, from the very first pitch deck, to achieve. The 24-year-old who wanted to make food from sewage wrote down that he would save Western civilization. A handful of years later, the Army handed him the keys to the procurement system. Whatever you think about that outcome, and there is genuinely a lot to think about, it is not a story anyone predicted. Except apparently, him. Thank you for listening to Tamaze Labs. You can show our podcast team some love with 5 stars and a follow. Stay hungry, stay foolish.
Grab news. Tamaze.